Hey, you guys. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Always good to see you. Hey, pop into the chat here. I want to see where you guys are from. Hi, Terry. And yeah, we're having a good day here. So thanks for asking. And I've got some good stuff coming up here. We're going to talk about landscape photography, some really good tips for you guys who want to improve your landscapes. The deal is, no matter what kind of photograph you're taking, sooner or later you're going to take a landscape. I guarantee it. You should. And so it's something you want to have in your toolkit. Even if you consider yourself some other genre photographer, I really don't know any photographers who don't sooner or later touch upon landscape photography. So we're going to do that. I'm going to just chat with you guys for a few minutes about something that is very important in the whole process of photography. And if you're not familiar with it, this will be new to you. But if you've been around my channel, you probably heard of these things. The 5 stages of photography, which are visualization, which we're going to talk about in a minute, more detail. Getting your vision, knowing what you're going to photograph. The whole key to a photograph, said Ansel Adams, is your ability to visualize it before you press the shutter. Think about that. The whole key. Boy, did I unlock that in terms of the key. You know, that's something I've really latched onto. Once you visualize, then you've got to know your equipment. Bob Holmes said, don't let the camera get in the way of your photography. You've got to know it so well that it does not intrude into your photography. And that is really important because a lot of people, I'm sorry to say, get obsessed with their cameras, which is the biggest way you can let it intrude. Think of it as something that's more important than the art of photography. Don't do that. Know your equipment so well that you know what it can do and you can make it work as a creative tool. Then you go out and you capture images. What is capturing? That is using composition and lighting. We're going to talk about composition in this video today, in this YouTube, because composition is there's 2 parts. Here we go, 2 parts, lighting and composition. And there's timing, you could argue, is part of that. That's actually, I consider, a compositional element. But 2 parts are lighting and composition. So if you know those 2, if you really understand lighting and you know how to use it, and I'm talking about natural lighting and landscapes, obviously. If you know how to work with lighting and you know composition, you can tell the story that you really want to tell with your images. And that's what it's all about, storytelling. Okay, then we go to from your capturing here, we go to your processing. You gotta process those images, and you process them based on your visualization, what you visualize for it. So that's the other tool of visualization. In fact, visualization does carry on through the whole cycle of photography. And then once you process your images, you want to get them out to the world, which is sharing. Getting your work out is so important. Like, we're doing something in our AYP Plus community. We've had a 28-day challenge where everybody's picked a project, also very important, and they're bringing those images to the class every week to get feedback and hear from the other members of the class, what they think. Because if you don't ever show your work to other people, it's sort of like if you were cooking a meal, but you never shared it with anyone else. You just cooked for yourself. I think you get tired of it after a while. And that's what I found as a photographer. I had a lot of stuff stuck in old boxes, negatives and so forth, stuck away that I hadn't been doing anything with. And then I kind of made a big breakthrough 20 years ago or so, and started really sharing all that stuff. I mean, it was easier in the digital age because there's a lot of ways to get your work out there. But no matter what you do, and the most important thing is to put your photographs on the wall. I'm not kidding. So, hey, listen, are any of those for you pain points? Are any of those areas challenges for you? Are any of those areas you know you need to work on? If you feel like it and you're brave enough, you could put that in the chat. We could talk about it. It's important to recognize if you do have, like in sports, if you have a weak point, you know you need to practice harder in that area. You know you need to push yourself. So this is kind of a little self-critiquing that's actually valuable self-critiquing, is to look at your skill sets. Look at these 5 areas. And of course, we can break them down in between, like for instance, capturing has a lot of information in there. But, the general subject of using lighting and composition would be what we're talking about here. But breaking it down and analyzing it for yourself and knowing what you need to work on is a very valuable skill set as a photographer, or in fact, learning anything in life. So I highly recommend that you do that. Okay. So I'll just do a couple of shout outs. Thanks, Peter, for joining us from Denmark, and Bakami, and JPT76 from Kansas, and of course Terry. So thanks, guys, and let me know, what are your pain points? What area do you need to work on? We're going to talk about, we're going to focus on capturing today, but I'd be interested to hear what's going on so we can deal with it in future episodes. Okay, well, let's get this party officially started. I'm Marc Silber. I'm an author and educator in Carmel, California. And I just want to let you know that our show today is brought to you by our friends at Bay Photo Lab. A second ago, I was talking about the importance of sharing your work. And the most important thing to start with is making sure you put your prints on your wall or in a book or in a frame, and you can see lots of ways to get that done here at Bay Photo. They will really help you out. Acrylic prints, you can save 20% off on one of these blocks. These are pretty cool. You can put them on a desk. Those are pretty neat. Father's Day gifts, they recommend 20% off. Metal prints, I have one of these, and they're really absolutely cool. They're, you get a very glossy surface here, and it can be pretty amazing with the right photograph. So that's pretty cool. You get 15% off. It's a different way. Obviously, it's a very different way than printing on a paper surface, but very cool, and it really works. Albums. Make albums. My wife and I, well, she does most of the album making. It's really cool, because we made them for all our kids. You keep one copy and you give one to them. You can make albums of your own trips. It's a great way to organize your photos and not have them just, stuffed away somewhere on your hard drive. And then press printed cards. We send these out every holiday season. They're really beautifully printed. And there's a lot of products besides just cards, as you can see here. Books and notebooks and all sorts of cool stuff. And those are 30% off. So do yourself a favor, head on over afterwards to Bay Photo and order something. And no matter what you order, you'll always get 25% off on your first order. So bingo, that's what you want to do. Okay, let's get started here. So let's talk about landscape photography. I started as a landscape photographer. I think that was my first genre. I do a lot of environmental portraits, but landscapes have a special place for me in my heart. And the thing is, it's a tool you're always going to want to know about. The material I'm going to go over with you is from my 2 books, Advancing Your Photography and The Secrets to Creating Amazing Photos, Composition. So these are 2 books I've written. By the way, you can get these at a huge discount by going to this URL right here, advancingyourphotography.com. We'll stick it in the chat here a little later on. You don't need to pop out right now and get it, but that's where this stuff is from. I've spent a lot of time, you guys, researching this, and I'm happy to bring you this information. So we've gone over this. The first thing is visualization, as I mentioned, and it's defined as the power of forming a mental picture or vision of something not actually present to the sight. It turns out that photography starts with you, not with your camera, and it starts with you getting a vision of what you want to photograph. And let me show you kind of a visual of that. This is me visualizing a photograph on our rugged coastline called Big Sur, California. I don't have a camera in my hand. I'm visualizing what I want this photograph to look like. Then, having done that, I said, well, I don't want to be that close up. I want to go way farther back. I want clouds. I want to capture this bridge in the image. And in this case, I'm using a tripod. Tripods are actually really handy when you're shooting landscapes, and I'll tell you why, for a couple of reasons. One, I was able to get this self-portrait. I had another camera set up on a tripod, and if you look at my hand here, you may not see it, but there's a little clicker right there. So I'm actually photographing myself photographing. But what tripods do in terms of landscapes is they make you slow down. Most of the time when you're shooting a landscape, it isn't like a split-second thing. You've got a little time on your hands, and the tripod adds that element of carefully looking and slowing down. So in the old days of, big cameras like some of these back here behind me, you can't see, I've got a 4x5 over here. We use tripods, and you can kind of emulate that. So that's my first tip. Take a tripod with you. You may want to put yourself in the frame, which is also useful with a tripod, because then you can put it on a self-timer, walk into the frame, and make yourself part of the image. But once I did that, then I captured that photograph and I visualized it as a black and white photograph. I wanted those clouds. I wanted, I wanted this. Obviously, this bridge here was really important to me. It's called Bixby Creek Bridge, and I wanted to photograph this rugged coastline. So that changed from a color image to a black and white because that was my vision. And how do you develop? A lot of people ask me this. So, Mark, I get it. You want me to visualize. How do I develop my visual library? Well, one of the best ways is to look at art. And you can go to museums physically when they open up, or you can go to online galleries. Like this is from the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Fantastic museum. I love these guys because they allow me to download really high resolution prints of these amazing artists. So this is our friend Rembrandt, and it's look at his clouds. Look at the use of the clouds. Look at the lighting, and look at how he placed. This is called a balance composition, where in the center here is this tree, and you get the idea that it's balanced by what's going on the left with this tree and what's going on over here. But if you really look at this, you can emulate this with your photographs. You can get those dark, moody skies. You can look for the lighting that's striking your center subject here. We can learn a lot from these artists. That is a big clue right there. Clue number 2. So I've talked about visualization. Now we're talking about go to museums or online galleries or books. Books are also great. And study that art. Don't just look at it, and glance at it, but really study it and find the artists that resonate the most with you and look at how they did it, and you'll learn a lot. We could do a whole class just on that. Train your eye to see images. They don't just jump out at you. You have to use, and we use this as a framing device, you have to train your eye to see photographs. And this is a very, very important skill that you can develop and continue to use. Look, if you're playing any sport, basketball, tennis, golf, surfing, whatever, what do? You do a lot of practice. How many times in basketball do they practice just making the shot, for a foul shot over and over and over? Well, you have to do the same thing with your eye. Train your eye to find images. Train your eye to see those images. They don't just jump out at you and wave big flags and say, hey, come on, Mark, press the shutter. You have to find those things, okay? By the way, as we're going through this, if you have a question, fire it away in the chat. I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, so training your eyes, we get to the 5 stages. I've already talked about that. Visualization. Where do we go from there? Well, we go into composition, which is, capture. Framing is your basic tool you're going to use over and over again. What framing does is it gives you layers, it gives you contrast, and it leads the person's eye to where you want it to go. So this is in that same area. This is a frame built from this fence and the edge of this tree. And what happens here is that gives you a layer. That gives you a foreground layer, okay? And that adds contrast and depth. What we're trying to do with our photographs, they're two-dimensional, but we're trying to make them appear three-dimensional. And framing is a key tool to make that happen. Now, with that frame in the foreground, we can then look into the background. And our eye is just naturally drawn to leading it through. In this case, we have a leading line also going here with the road. And we'll talk about that particular leading line in a minute. But that's what framing does. And you want to constantly use that. There's lots of frames out there. There's, natural frames like I just showed you with a tree, or, in this case, it was kind of a combination of a natural frame and a man-made frame. I'm going to go backwards here with the fence. There's doors that are great frames. There's trees that are frames. There's bridges and buildings and all sorts of things can form frames. Look for them all the time. This is another compositional tool, and it's really definitely got a huge use in landscape photography. It's called group shape composition. That's on page, you'll find it on page 66 of this book if you've got it. If you don't have it, you should get it. And there's this quote, amazing photographer. I'm going to have to get rid of myself here. I'll move myself up there. This is a tremendously talented photographer, Camille Seaman, and she said, think of everything as shapes. You're arranging shapes in such a way to interact and to activate space, to push things forward and pull things back, to draw your eye here or guide your eye there. When you understand that and you do it in that way, composition becomes like a ballet. It really becomes choreography. This is important, you guys, because you may have to move around. Your landscape isn't going to move for you. It's not like a person where you can say, hey, would you mind moving over next to that tree? You can do that with people. Landscapes, you have to do the moving. But what she's saying is look at the shapes and move around until those shapes come together. This particular composition tool is called group shape composition. This is a photograph that I took in Hermanus, South Africa. And there's a lot of shapes here. There's many different shapes going on, and I'm going to break it down for you. So we have the clouds. That's a whole set of shapes right there, isn't it? Then we have the mountains on the left, another set of shapes. We have the mountains on the right, another set of shapes, and we put those all together and we get grouped shape composition. And I moved into where I framed it the way I wanted it. And I moved around a little bit because I wanted to get that sunset. I mean, the sunset's pretty amazing there. But that's group shape composition. It adds depth, it adds dimension, and it really will help you tell that story. So always look for how you can group those different compositional elements together. Is this making sense to you guys? You guys digging this? Okay. Another group shape composition with the added bonus of clouds. This is the Matterhorn. And the birds. So the birds form what we call a punctuation point. Now, imagine this photograph with no clouds, blue sky, and just the mountain. It'd be okay, right? But it would look like a postcard. If you wanted a postcard, why not just buy a postcard? If you want your own stamp on it, you want to put your thumbprint on your photograph, then you look for these other elements. I love clouds. In almost every landscape I take, I try to see how I can get clouds into it. I don't add them, by the way. These are not photoshopped in later, although there is a pretty cool, I haven't used it successfully. I've played with it, where you can add clouds and sky replacement, that sort of thing. I'm not a big believer in that, but that's just me. But I looked for this element of something else. A punctuation point gives you exactly what a punctuation point does in writing. It just helps highlight what your image is about. In this case, these two birds soaring really added to the image for me. And I waited for them. I try to use birds a lot in landscapes, or people, or animals, or even a car. I want some other element in there besides just the mountain, let's say. So that's another compositional tool. Look for weather, look for clouds, but look for those punctuation points. You could argue, Mark, that isn't really just a pure landscape because you've got a deer, prominently in the foreground. Well, I believe it is still a landscape. Or you could say it's a portrait of a deer. But it's an environmental portrait, obviously in the deer's own environment. What you have behind us is Half Dome, an amazing feature in Yosemite National Park. And in this case, I'm up close, really close to this deer. I wasn't using a particularly long lens. I think it was maybe 70 millimeter. So I wasn't that far away from it. And I engaged it. I love taking photographs of animals because I look at them and I treat them like people. And I try to take portraits of them. So this is a portrait of this deer in its own environment. And you have the grasses and the trees and the, Half Dome behind this deer. S-curves are really cool. This is another one of my compositional tools. So this book here contains 83 different compositional tools. This is number 23. This is in the Grand Teton National Park. Beautiful park. I've been there many times. I've climbed around these mountains here. I haven't climbed to the very top of the Grand Teton, but all around here we backpacked and spent a lot of time. And this is called the Snake River. It's an S-curve. S-curves are really cool because they lead your eye gracefully to your subject. And the main subject of this photo is the Grand Teton right here in the middle. It's the biggest of all these different mountains. And notice what's happening is the curve of the river leads your eye right to where you want the subject ultimately to be highlighted. S-curves are beautiful. You usually find them in rivers. You can find them in roads. Look for them and use them. One of the key things, the point I made in my book, is you've got to know what these things are, because if you don't know what they are, you might just miss them. You might think, well, I don't know, maybe I need to use this, maybe I don't. Look for them, because there's 84 different 83. I've added some more since I wrote this book, but there's 83 in the book. And if you know about them, you'll find them. If you don't know about them, you might miss them. Very important. And that's why I wrote the book. I wrote it like a recipe book. I wrote it like something that you could carry around with you and get inspired by. Triangle composition, this is really cool. This is something that's been utilized by classical artists for centuries and centuries. They know that what a triangle does is it provides stability and strength. And you can find these in nature, like this one with Half Dome. It's a composition based on a triangular shape. And doesn't it just say strength and stability to you? You can do it with people too, by the way. And I have some examples in the book of classical art using triangles. But again, look for them. They're out there. Whenever you find one, get ready to press your shutter, because it's going to build a really strong image for you. It's going to be an element that you can use. This is, by the way, just contrasting it to this earlier picture of Half Dome. Look at the difference. Let's go back. Here we go. So in this photograph, we have Half Dome, obviously out of focus, shallow depth of field. It's present, but it's not dominant in this image. the way we have here. So this is an example of how one setting can be served in many different ways. And this is another point I want to bring up to you, is when you're photographing landscapes, you may go back to them again and again and again. This is also true with animals. Florian Schultz mentioned that, go back to the same location again and again and again, and you can develop a lot of different images from it. And one thing that happens is because you're familiar with that environment, you get different flavors. And this one, for instance, it's clear skies. And the other one that I showed you, very dark sky. And the reason for that is because there was, unfortunately, a bad forest fire that was blowing smoke into Yosemite Valley. In fact, it was so bad that the previous 2 days, we couldn't even see Half Dome. It was just this hazy thing out there. And there was no way to get a decent photograph of it. It was just covered with smoke. Well, there's still a lot of smoke in the atmosphere you can see because of the orange alpenglow. I mean, that happens anyway as the sun is going down, but it was accentuated by the smoke. But you can see the smoke in the sky here, you guys. See that? So that's another thing that happens when you go back and you photograph the same thing over and over again. You're going to see different things happen. You're going to see different things pop up. And it's part of your adventure as a photographer. So I totally invite you to do that. And I've come to the end of my tips here. I just want to remind you that you can find out much, much more about these from my 2 books. And if you go to advancingyourphotography.com, you can get them at a huge discount. Not kidding. I'm actually giving away this book, Advancing Your Photography, if you cover the postage. And my other 2 books you can get it digitally at half price. So that's what I wanted to cover with you guys today. If you have a question or a comment, put it in the chat. Otherwise, I want you to go out and use these things. It's really important that you try these things out. And I hope you've learned at least one thing today. But try it out. You've got to use it. I don't care if you're using your iPhone. I do shoot a lot on my iPhone. If you're shooting with your iPhone, it's a camera. It's a pretty remarkable camera. Use these tools with it. And I wrote this book to be used by any kind of camera, whether it's an iPhone, a film camera, digital camera, DSLR, mirrorless, doesn't matter what kind of camera, because composition is universal. In fact, it could be used by any other type of artist for that matter. Drawing, painting, composition tools are used no matter what you're doing. Okay, we've got something. So, what are you saying here, Sandy? Jared, there's many people in the chat, but they don't like the video. What video?
As in, he's saying that we should be telling people to please like the stream, which we definitely encourage.
And I didn't ask you guys to also, thank you, Sandy. I didn't ask you guys to also subscribe and enable the bell the way I should at the beginning here. And hey, Sandy, I appreciate that. Yeah, so if you guys haven't liked the video, please do so. And where was the, let's see, isn't that where the waterfall goes up? In Yosemite, the waterfall goes up. I don't know of a waterfall that goes up. There are lots of waterfalls in Yosemite. Maybe you could clarify that question, Terry, and I'll be able to answer it more intelligently. Yosemite has many, many, many waterfalls. And you can certainly climb up next to the waterfall, and I've done that many, many times. And that's always very interesting. So let me hear what you have to say. And if you guys
see that there are some waterfalls that apparently do go up occasionally. There's one in Hawaii, apparently one in India. Very fascinating.
I didn't know there was such a thing. I'll have to get enlightened on that. But Yosemite, as far as I know, isn't one of them, but it's a beautiful place. Do this no matter where you're taking your landscapes. Continue, like I said, continue to go back and try these different things with it. Look for those S-curves. Look for the triangles. Obviously you're going to look for framing no matter what. Look for the group shape composition. And, when you go out mindfully, searching for those different elements that you can use, looking for the punctuation points, looking for diagonal lines. I didn't cover that, but that's very powerful as well. You have in your mind, you have this amazing ability to form images. And if you study the works of great artists and you look for these compositional tools, you'll find them. And that's really a fun thing. And it's a really thrilling thing to do. Okay, if you guys don't have any other questions or comments, I'm going to say, once again, be sure to subscribe, enable the bell, and thank you. Please do like and leave your comments because I love hearing what you guys have to say. I'm going to be giving a webinar in an hour and a half. Jared can put the link in there. I'm going to talk about more of this stuff. It's free. You guys can join me. There's some more likes. Thank you. I love seeing that. And other than that, I just want to remind you of this, to remember to get out and capture your own images of life. Thanks for joining me, you guys. Stay safe, stay well, stay creative, and join us in an hour in the webinar. Okay? Take care. It's been great.